Uganda's Constitutional Court has agreed to hear 3 petitions challenging the Anti-Homosexuality Act. The law imposes severe penalties, including the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, which involves sexual acts with children or vulnerable persons. Human rights groups say there's been a wave of rights violations against the queer community since the law was enacted. I spoke to human rights lawyer Nicholas Opiyo about the court bid challenging the Anti-Homosexual Act. Here's how our conversation went. Nicholas, appreciate you speaking to us on Africa Today. Thank you for staying up. Can you provide us with an update on the current status of the challenge to Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act in the Constitutional Court?
Well, thank you very much for having me. The Ugandan Constitutional Court has started the preparatory process for the hearing of the 3 petitions that are challenging the Anti-Homosexuality Act in Uganda. The first appearance before the court was on the 2nd of October. It was supposed to be a conferencing of one of the 3 petitions. Unfortunately, the Attorney General was not prepared, and the court has directed the Attorney General to file his conferencing notes by the 12th of October. So we shall be going back to court on the 12th of October and hope that on that day, the Attorney General will be prepared and the case can be conferenced so that we can set the case down for a hearing before the judges of the Constitutional Court.
So, Nicholas, you speak of 3 arguments, I think 3 petitions you mentioned. Are these 3 separate petitions, and what does each petition speak to?
The basic contents of all the 3 petitions are the same. The differences are minor. The first petition argues 2 procedural irregularities, namely the enactment of the law without necessarily getting the proper financial implication statement from the Minister of Finance, as well as the enactment being an attempt to overturn previous court judgments.
Nicholas, you've mentioned that there are 3 petitions that are before the courts. Are these 3 petitions different?
The substantive arguments in all the 3 petitions are the same. The only differences are very slight. They're majorly procedural and technical argument, being the conduct of the Speaker of Parliament in the process of passing the law, and the other being the implications on the finances of the country, since this was a private member's bill. Other than those 2, the substantive human rights arguments in the petition are largely the same in all the 3 petitions, namely that the law is a violation of inherent fundamental human rights. It is a violation of Uganda's obligation under international law and therefore should be nullified.
Now, what's clear is that this law is considered draconian in many regards. It is one of the harshest anti-LGBTQI plus laws on the planet. How significant it is that it is actually being heard by the courts?
It is significant because we've been here 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the court did not deal with the substantive human rights question of whether the Ugandan constitution provides equal protection to the country's LGBTI community. Instead, what the court did was to nullify the law on the basis of a technicality, namely that it was passed without quorum in Parliament. The important bit about that judgment in 2014 is that it left the substantive question unattended to. Now the court has a chance, once and for all, to determine the substantive question of whether the Ugandan law protects every single Ugandan regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It is significant that this case is moving up the court system quite quickly, in a court system that is really more pronounced by its slow pace of dealing with such questions. So the fact that the case is coming up quickly is significant for us, and we hope that the court can hear this case and decide it by the end of the year. We say so because this law has real life implication on so many Ugandans who are being affected, not just members of the LGBTI community. people in the real estate industry who are being criminalized for simply providing housing to persons perceived or who are in fact members of the LGBTI community. The law is having lasting impact on civil society who are providing life-saving services to the LGBTI community, because that would be constituted to be criminalization. That would be constituted to be promotion of homosexuality. And so the second reason really is that it has had real foreign policy implication and economic impact on the country. For those reasons, I think it is important that the law should be heard quickly and decided by the end of the year. We hope that the court will do that.
Now, when you look at the context of the law, the process in which the passing of this bill came about, it was very clear from President Yoweri Museveni that he is anti-homosexuality. Do you get the sense that there's been external pressure from nations such as the United Nations that have called out Yoweri Museveni and called out the Ugandan government? Do you think this is the reason that maybe the courts are hearing the law and are seemingly expediting the processes?
Well, there have been real economic impacts on the country. The World Bank has suspended any new grants or loans to Uganda, a country that largely depends on international financial institutions for its GDP. These things have real life implications. The government is broke. The government has also come under enormous pressure from negative publicity. Stories around the world about Uganda is only about this law. The impact of that is that the business community from all over the world would be hesitant to invest their money and time in Uganda. Some of them have walked away. It is therefore imperative that this economic impact can grind this country to a halt, or at least to a very difficult time. For those reasons, I think that this case is being expedited. But like I said before, it is also for a domestic reason that you're having an uproar. There is a large number of the LGBTI community who are fleeing Uganda, who are facing, those who are staying are facing increased attacks, not from the state, but from radicalized and homophobic, transphobic members of the community. And I think that there is an acute realization in the courts of law and in the country that this law is having unintended consequences, and the courts must deal with it once and for all.
So let's talk about reaction from those that are pro and anti the law. What sort of reaction have you seen on the streets of Uganda?
Ugandan people are really very welcoming. And if you are just a casual tourist in this country, you may not even see the homophobic attacks on the LGBTI community. You've got to know the LGBTI community, where they live, and their daily life experiences to be able to understand the real impact of this law. In large parts of the country, several people are being evicted by landlords and in some cases by communities in which they live on the basis of simply being perceived or in fact being members of the LGBTI community. These kind of violations happen every day, but in small unreported amounts and numbers across the country. But what you also hear publicly in this country is increased anti-LGBTI sentiments expressed by public officials and by large members of the Ugandan media that is largely owned by faith groups. If you go to any school, young kids are being taught hatred of the LGBTI community. I've had cases of parents receiving their kids back home with notes and instructions to throw away their rainbow-colored toys and books. And so you can see that there's widespread anti-gay sentiments being passed around in institutions of learning and in many religious groupings and meetings, including religious-owned media in this country, which is the vast majority, especially on radio and TV.